Growing up, I often felt like an outsider in a world that seemed to have strict rules around normalcy. From a young age, my family, teachers, peers, and even caregivers cast me in a role that felt ill-fitting, one that labeled me as different and often, unfortunately, mentally retarded. This perception shaped my childhood experience, as I navigated through life with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, OCD, etc., struggling to understand not just myself, but the world around me. In daycare, I was surrounded by smiling faces and playful laughter, but it often felt like those moments weren't meant for me. While the other kids easily engaged in games, sharing toys and stories, I seemed perpetually out of step. My hyperactivity was often dismissed as disruptive behavior, and the caregivers and other kids always seemed to despise me as being less than them. At least this was how it felt. All of my life, as Tupac said, all I've ever mostly gotten was mean mugs and cold stares. One moment I was hyperactive, other moments I was dissociated and rigid. Teachers would often shake their heads, implying that my energy was a problem rather than a part of who I was. I remember feeling a sting of defeat each time I heard the familiar phrases. "Why can't you just focus? You need to settle down. Get out of my class." They couldn't see the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind, the sensations of my body, or how confusing it was to process their words. Instead of feeling like a vibrant child, I felt like a puzzle that everyone was trying to force into the wrong box. As I grew throughout elementary school, the weight of those labels only doubled. Teachers categorized me based on test results and behavior. They would often place me in separate classes or programs, conflating my learning differences with an inability to learn. Though I was hardly self-conscious anyhow, it still made me feel somewhat ostracized. I was always aware of the looks from peers, a mix of confusion and disdain, as they whispered to one another about me. I spent countless hours playing with myself on the side during recess, talking to myself in my own world of imagination. The complications of my dyslexia made reading a monumental challenge as a child. Words swirled and twisted before my eyes, and it was frustrating to watch my classmates breeze through their assignments. Each time I received a poor grade, I felt like the labels piled higher and higher upon me. Slow, stupid, dumb, or simply not trying hard enough. I even had to attend summer school in kindergarten. My parents frequently received calls from my teachers and caregivers, expressing their concern over my disruptive behavior. Thus, I was always the one who got the most whippings out of my siblings I grew up with. I wanted to scream, to explain that I wasn't choosing to struggle or to be a so-called bad child. I simply could not control my impulses, and I saw the world differently from others. Throughout my teenage years, I longed for acceptance. The dynamics of social interactions felt like an intricate dance that I was never taught. While others effortlessly navigated friendships, I found it difficult to understand social cues. I often spoke or acted out of turn, misreading expressions or behaviors, which only reinforced that feeling of being awkward and weird. Group projects left me feeling inadequate when my ideas were dismissed, and people struggled to comprehend my thought process. I could hardly pay attention. I talked to myself often, I fidgeted, I swung my head back and forth a lot, I dissociated often, while acting out made-up skits and movies in my head. I would repeat certain words or phrases I heard multiple times. I had and have the voice of a 10-year-old boy. I was the kid who walked around school while everyone was in class. The list goes on. I hardly ever stood up for myself, and somewhat became a pushover. I never cared for myself either, often neglecting my personal hygiene, and thus, becoming the smelly girl to many others. My hair was damaged from frequent perms and broken off in the back with a wide gap for over 5 years before cutting it all off in 11th grade. From elementary to high school, I would barely even look in the mirror because I hated my face. Even when I did, I never learned to look at different angles of my body and often went in public unaware of my full appearance. During those years, I deeply believed there was something fundamentally wrong with me. My parents often seemed to express a sort of disdain for me. Whenever I needed tutorial or got bad grades, my father would yell, "I don't have any stupid kids. You're not retarded." I never realized, as my mother told me, that teachers and principals have always told them to get me mentally evaluated. It seemed as though my family often held quiet beliefs about how I was the slow one of the family and how I was most likely to struggle in life. This constant barrage of negativity from family and others is what fostered an internal dialogue of self-doubt that would carry into my adult years. After graduating high school, I found myself standing on the precipice of the future, yet feeling more lost than ever. While my peers were excited about college, jobs, and new adventures, I felt like I was caught in a dense fog, suffocating under the weight of my own expectations and insecurities. This overwhelming sense of despair marked the beginning of a dark journey that would last for over 5 years. At first, it was subtle. The euphoria of graduation quickly faded, and the pressure of adult responsibilities settled in. I felt like I was supposed to have everything figured out while grappling with questions that loomed large. What was I going to do next? Did I even belong in this world? The transition was a lot smoother for others, which left me feeling isolated and inadequate. Months passed, and my mood shifted from sadness to a deep-seated depression. I saw myself as a burden to my parents and friends for having to rely on them often. The darkness became relentless, whispering that the only way to relieve this burden was to disappear entirely. The darkness felt as thick as tar, pulling me down into an abyss where I felt completely alone. My body would shake, and my brain would feel heavy, often feeling as if I were about to die or have a stroke. As the pain intensified, I turned to self-harm as a way to cope. Cutting became an escape from my mind, which provided a physical sensation of relief. But it was only temporary. Afterward, I was left with deep scars, both physical and emotional, reminders of a battle I felt I was losing. Each day morphed into an exhausting cycle of pain and guilt, and I withdrew even further into my own thoughts, rotting in my bed for 16 to over 20 hours a day. Sometimes the darkness would lift, just enough for me to imagine my future, but it would quickly follow with thoughts of suicide. I fantasized about jumping off bridges or finding ways to end my life that wouldn't attract attention. I didn't want it to seem like I was seeking sympathy or pity. I imagined disappearing quietly, like a whisper lost in the wind, leaving no trace behind. I imagined myself buried in a box somewhere deep in the woods where no one could find me. The thought of running away became comforting, like hiding from the world that felt so heavy and unforgiving. Although my emotional outbursts, teetering body weight, and sunken eyes gave away my mental state, I still tried to wear a mask of normalcy, engaging in conversations and trying to make small talk. And though the mask slipped often, many still never knew the true depth of the storm brewing beneath my surface. I tried socializing with friends, but inside, I was screaming silently. I felt like I was in a dark tunnel with no light at the end, where each day felt heavier than the last. Occasionally, thoughts of reaching out would surface, but the fear of judgment silenced me. I believed that sharing my thoughts would burden others and create more chaos in the lives of people I loved. I felt trapped. The idea of seeking help only added to my sense of shame. After so long of battling despair, I reached a point where the weight became unbearable. After being kicked out of my parents' house, living on the floor of my sister's apartment, one day as I was engulfed in darkness, I seriously contemplated ending my life. I thought about how it would affect my family, but convinced myself it was better than enduring the endless pain. At that moment, I realized that something had to change. I could no longer continue living this way, nor could I hide my suffering any longer. I screamed out to God as loud as I could. Help me. Help me. Help me, please. It would seem, in hindsight, that at that moment, a light had sparked in the atmosphere and a loud bell went off. It was like the movie Jumanji, where after yelling out the word Jumanji, the atmosphere glowed green with a loud ring. It was at this moment that God decided to finally reveal himself to me. He seemed to tell me that it was me all along who ignored his advice of ask, and you shall receive, and knock, and the door will be opened to you. Thus, after that pivotal moment of choosing to seek help, I began to notice subtle signs from God, guiding me towards answers about myself and life in general. I then embarked on a journey of self-education, transforming into a full autodidactic. I immersed myself in reading, spending most of my paychecks devouring over 100 to 200 books across various fields. From science and biology, mathematics, history, language, communication, psychology, psychiatry, metaphysics, etc. Each book opened new doors and broadened my understanding of the false, elusive system in which we live. Watching documentaries and lectures became a regular part of my routine. I eagerly consumed articles and research, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. This relentless pursuit fueled my transformation and provided clarity and a deeper understanding of who I was, and how it was never intended for me to fit into this world. My journey of self-discovery turned challenges into insights, and the more I learned, the more liberated I felt. I embraced my uniqueness, found my purpose, and obeyed God's mission to wake his people. I became eager to inspire Black youth to explore their own paths of understanding through knowledge of self, knowledge of their enemy, and most importantly, the knowledge of God. Thus, what birthed out of this process of turning heat into gold, of making diamonds out of pressure, was the Black self-development and defensive warfare brand called Sensical. Thus, we will restate from the introduction episode exactly what Sensical is. Sensical is a Black self-development brand that offers an esoteric framework of knowledge and defensive warfare, which is based on the fundamental curriculum of what I call common sense. CENTS. Common Sense provides an abstract, unorthodox approach to Black economic literacy by exposing how cognitive neurological disorders are trauma-based outputs that are intentionally primed in Black youth and perpetuated by hidden assault devices which are placed inside of themselves and their environments. Sensical equips Black youth with the survival skills necessary to combat the silent warfare, mass experimentation, and human targeting which aims to disrupt the thought processes and disengage the mind from what is going on around it. It is a fundamental framework and specialized curriculum based on Melanin science and mathematics, which deductively illuminates how the framing of neurodiversity, such as autism, ADHD, and the symptoms of dyslexia, OCD, etc., produces a false perception of self and reality. Neurodiversity, on one hand, is a trauma-based, dissociative phenomenon caused by the unconsciousness of offensive assaults aimed at an individual since birth or otherwise. These elusive projections are intentionally primed into the psychobiology of Black youth via the daily manipulation, overstimulation, and exploitation of the natural sense faculties. The aim of this assault is to disrupt the natural patterns of cognition and to split the mind into dissociative fragments. The system of silent warfare and technology operates within the real-life construct of the mental distortion game called Where's Waldo? Decoding this insidious game of survival requires impeccable forms of communication, which leave no room for ambiguity, false interpretation, or confusion. The most vital need for Black youth is a comprehensive guide of life, which entails the most elementary form of language, and which is tailored to the personal experiences of Black mental disorder and targeted aggression. Thus, the practical education of today must consist of 4 things. Number 1, the composition of systems, which illuminates the coding and mechanics of systemic devices. Number 2, the 4 devices of navigation. This includes base mathematics, Melanin science, binary language, and the significance of time cycles and history. Number 3, the art of technology. This illuminates the enemy's book of tricks and covert tactics of systemic human targeting. Number 4, exclusive survival codes. This entails defensive warfare skills, as well as skills for Black self-development and collective development. No more mysterious life riddles, vague scriptures, ambiguous metaphors, secret code language, or overly complex rocket science curriculums which seem to provide no practical value to the immediate needs of Black youth. This is especially significant in considering that this insidious game of overstimulation is most exploitative of the melanated neurodivergent, who makes up a large and ever-growing percentage of today's Black youth. Nevertheless, while Sensical is primarily aimed at the upliftment of the foundational Black American, it can also be used as a defensive guide for all human beings of the earth. Now, let's get to it. Why is proper warfare training and education most important for Black youth? It is because you are the primary targets of the enemy. In the eyes of white supremacy, you are public enemy number 1. Judith Varnell Shorer, the Israeli consul general in Atlanta, Georgia, exclaimed that it was Black youth who are the number 1 threat to the progress of Israel. She said, quote, "The major problem with Israel is with the young generation of the Black community. Black Lives Matter starts there." End quote. As we know, Israel and the United States government are essentially siblings, with Israel being the big brother in charge. Many American police officers even train in Israel to learn harmful combat techniques on how to best subdue and kill the Black man and woman. The youth are often regarded as the true atoms of change because they embody energy, innovation, and a fresh perspective on societal issues. Their capacity to challenge the status quo and push for reform is crucial, as they are not bound by traditional norms or limited experiences. Through social media and technology, young people can mobilize quickly, raising awareness and uniting communities around common causes. It is the youth who pass on the tendencies of the generations before them, after the elders have passed. Black youth in particular, however, is the primary catalyst of the whole earth. It is foundational Black American culture that is most influential not only to America, but to the world. It is the $1.9 trillion spending power of the foundational Black American, when united and properly organized, that the enemy fears most. It is the foundational Black American who is the true economic engine of America, from the booming implications of chattel slavery, which built America's industries, to Black technological inventions, to Black minds which curate white ideas, etc. Youth in general are the atoms of any society. Black youth and culture are the atoms of the world. It was Elijah Muhammad who stated that the unity of Black people is like an atomic bomb. An atomic bomb releases immense energy through the process of nuclear fission, where the nucleus of heavy atoms, like uranium or plutonium, is split into smaller nuclei upon being struck by neutrons. This reaction releases a large amount of energy due to the conversion of a tiny amount of mass into energy, as described by Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. The chain reaction amplifies this energy release, which results in an explosive force that can devastate entire cities, thus illustrating how a small change at the tiniest level can produce catastrophic consequences on a large scale. Black people are considered the least of society, yet our economic unity will be the atomic explosion which catapults us not only to the top of society, but to the top of the world. This is the real reason why Black people are most primarily affected by disease and disorder caused by targeted assaults of the enemy. Statistics show, for example, significant disparities in the diagnosis of autism and ADHD among Black boys compared to their peers. As of 2023, 29.3 per 1,000 Black children were diagnosed with autism. In a 2022 CDC report, Black children had a prevalence rate of 1 in 27 among 8-year-olds, higher than white children, who had a rate of 1 in 52. Approximately 15% of boys are diagnosed with ADHD, whereas the rate for girls is 8%. This indicates a higher diagnosis rate for Black boys overall. Black children are diagnosed with ADHD at rates of 12%, comparable to white children, while Asian children have a lower diagnosis rate of 4%. These numbers are steadily growing, as the gap between white and Black neurodiversity steadily widens. Thus, it is Black youth who are in need of the most help and attention. So, exactly what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is the concept that neurological differences, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and others, are natural variations of the human brain rather than deficits or disorders. It promotes the idea that these differences should be recognized and respected as part of human diversity, advocating for acceptance and inclusion. The neurodiversity movement emphasizes that varying neurological conditions contribute unique perspectives and strengths to society. However, by perpetuating false propaganda and social engineering, the enemy clandestinely utilizes the false diagnosis of ADHD, autism, etc., to paint Black youth as an inherent crutch to society. Thus, in the context of trauma-based mental illness, Sensical utilizes a more accurately correct definition. The term neuro means a prefix that relates to nerves or the nervous system. It is derived from the Greek word neuron, meaning nerve. The term divergent means drawing apart from a common point, diverging. Thus, in the context of utilizing common sense, and not as it pertains to the literal definition of the term, a neurodivergent is therefore anyone whose brain has suffered from low to high forms of emotional and/or physical trauma, as all trauma causes the nerves and nervous system to diverge from its original state. ADHD, autism, dyslexia, etc. are simply different outputs caused by trauma. Thus, the more comprehensive definition of the sensical term would be: neurodiversity is a trauma-based, hypnotically dissociative phenomena caused by the unconsciousness of traumatic injury. There is no such thing as neurodiversity. There is only the randomized grouping and labeling of chemical assault outputs, post-traumatic stress or PTSD outputs, along with natural melanin instinctive outputs, most primarily triggered by assaults aimed at the human since before birth or otherwise. In Black people, neurodiversity is caused by the overstimulation and/or reduction of the biochemical and sensory motherboard called melanin. Therefore, it is a difference between Black neurodiversity and white neurodiversity. Black people possess the 5 base senses, plus the supernatural, extrasensory instincts of eumelanin, while Caucasians only possess pheomelanin and the 5 basic senses, which are still more reduced in comparison to the base senses of Black people. The root of neurodiversity is all about sensory overstimulation, and therefore, overstimulating the already reduced senses of Caucasians simply means to bring Caucasian sense perception to the normal state of melanated Blacks. This means that on the cognitive level, white Caucasian neurodiversity is essentially the equivalent of the Black normal or neurotypical state, while Black neurodiversity, which is traumatic, is the equivalent of the normal white Caucasian state of reduced functioning and sense perception. Thus, with all of that being said, here are the 12 axioms of common sense, which will be meticulously elaborated upon throughout the episodes of this podcast. 1. As stated, neurodiversity, on one hand, is a trauma-based, hypnotically dissociative phenomena caused by the unconsciousness of traumatic injury. There is no such thing as neurodiversity, just a randomized grouping and labeling of chemical assault outputs, post-traumatic stress outputs, and natural melanin instinctive outputs, most primarily triggered by assaults aimed at an individual since birth or otherwise. 2. The fundamental, 3D mental architecture of the holographic simulation called the Matrix is psychological suggestion, hallucination, and delusion. It is cognitive hypnotic warfare. 3. Neurodiversity produces a dual aspect in the black mind and body, which manifests disorder in the five base senses, yet inadvertently triggers the supernatural, extrasensory instincts of melanin. Number 4. There is no such thing as idiopathic or incurable mental disease in general, only the grouping of physical and emotional trauma outputs and natural instincts which can most often be corrected. 5. All warfare tactics of the enemy are patterned after the science of cognition, trauma-based mental disorder, God, and melanin systems. That means his tactics are patterned after the design of melanin humans, melanin civilizations, melanin nature, and the melanin universe. 6. 7-base systems logic is the basis for analytical thinking. 7. The first Hermetic base law of all things manifesting from the mind means, on one hand, that all things in the contemporary world manifests from the biological psychology of the mind which founded it. 8. All disorder symptoms of black neurodiversity are the biological characteristics of which the Neanderthal Caucasoid is naturally born with. The projection theory of disease, a theory posited by common sense, states that most, if not all, mental and physical diseases are the result of the collective Caucasian inferiority complex, in which people of melanin are biochemically, sociologically, and economically manipulated to reflect the attributes of the Caucasian ethnogenesis and the melanin-deficient Neanderthal Caucasoid. The natural Caucasian genotype, called Neanderthal, is artificially engineered into people of color to produce the unnatural phenotype called Nigga. 9. All things in this contemporary world are made for the exclusive survival of its melanin-deficient Caucasian founder. 10. The tactic of divide and conquer means to divide, conquer, and imitate the interconnected aspects of the biochemical called melanin, from the microcosm of the melanin mind and the melanin body, to the macrocosm of melanin communities, to melanin nations, melanin nature biology, the melanin universe, and the melanin god. 11. White supremacy is an inveterate offensive war of physical, chemical, psychological, and covert agent attacks by the implementation of rules, traditions, behaviors, strategies, tactics, and maneuvers, which produce tangibly effective weapons that target and destroy the mental and physical faculties of melanin and human functioning, and which produce the psychological, biological, and historical characteristics of the Neanderthal Caucasoid, done in order to perpetuate the physical survival of the genetically recessive Caucasian race, as well as to satisfy the psychological resentment of their animalistic, melanin-deficient nature. 12. To have common sense means to have the correct cognitive perception of melanin. Melanin is the most common aspect of reality in all areas of existence. It is the sensory motherboard of reality, and thus, it is the most common sense of all senses. It is to have knowledge of self, knowledge of enemy, and knowledge of God. Essentially, therefore, to have common melanin sense is to have optimal base sensory intelligence and the optimal knowledge of survival. 7-base systems logic, a framework posited by common sense, is a mental framework to properly analyze complex or non-complex phenomena and problems. The 7 Hermetic laws of nature provides the foundational architecture of all systems, and most importantly, the architecture of the enemy's warfare system. The 7 Hermetic laws are: 1. Mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. 2. Correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. 3. Vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. 4. Polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Both like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. 5. Rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. 6. Cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has a cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. 7. Gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests in all planes. To break this down in computer terms, it means: 1. The law of mentalism is the operating system of computers. 2. Correspondence, meaning as above so below, is the fractal application and compounding aspect of computers. 3. Vibration is the aspect of motional charge in computers. 4. Duality and polarity is the binary code language of computers. 5. The law of rhythm is the aspect of cyclic patterns in computers. 6. Causality means the output of computers. 7. The law of gender provides means for the balance and correction of computers. We now have the foundational blueprint of systemic warfare. Systems theory is the root to all things. It is the root to logic and the root to reason. It is the root of the mind. As stated by common sense axiom number 7, the first hermetic base law of all things manifesting from the mind means that all things in the contemporary world manifests from the biological psychology of the mind which founded it. This means that not only is everything in the world based on the psychology of the mind, but also the physical and metaphysical structure of the mind. And as stated by common sense axiom number 8, all disease symptoms of Black neurodiversity are the biological characteristics of which the Neanderthal Caucasoid is naturally born with. As stated by axiom number 9, all things in this contemporary world are made for the exclusive survival of its melanin-deficient Caucasian founder. Therefore, it is the melanin-deficient psychobiology of the Caucasian which must be studied in order to decode the blueprint of his world. Just as the Black aboriginals of Egypt and other civilizations knew to pattern the pyramids and other structures after the human body, likewise, the enemy is wise enough to pattern his world not only after melanin, but after his own physical body. When it comes to engineering the warfare system of trauma-based mind control, the CIA operation called MKUltra is the primary manual besides melanin that the enemy utilizes to engineer neurodiversity and cognitive distortion in the minds of society. MKUltra was a secret program initiated by the CIA in the early 1950s that sought to develop methods for mind control and psychological manipulation, particularly during the Cold War era. This project aimed to explore techniques that could be used in espionage, interrogation, and enhancing CIA capabilities in psychological warfare. MKUltra was founded in response to fears that foreign powers, particularly the Soviet Union and China, were developing mind control techniques that could be employed against the United States. To counter this perceived threat, the main objectives of the CIA were to investigate the potential of various drugs and materials for manipulating human behavior, as well as developing techniques for interrogation and brainwashing, which could extract information from unwilling subjects. The key components of MKUltra included 1. Drug experiments. The program extensively tested psychoactive substances, especially LSD, on unwitting subjects. The belief was that these drugs could alter perceptions, induce states of compliance, and facilitate mind control. 2. Psychological and physical torture. MKUltra included experiments on hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and various forms of torture-like methods to induce trauma and stress in the subjects. This aimed to explore how psychological thresholds could be breached. MKUltra encompassed over 150 subprojects, ranging from experiments conducted in hospitals and universities to unethical testing in non-consensual environments, such as prisons and mental institutions. It became notorious for its lack of oversight and blatant disregard for ethical standards and human feeling or life. Many experiments were conducted without informed consent, often targeting vulnerable populations, such as mental health patients and drug addicts. Thus, subjects suffered long-term psychological effects, including extreme trauma and mental health issues. The program began to unravel in the 1970s due to investigative journalism and hearings led by the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission. A significant portion of MKUltra documentation was destroyed in 1973, which complicated efforts to piece together the full extent of the program. The outcry surrounding MKUltra prompted reforms and more stringent ethical standards for government-sponsored human subject research. It is supposed that the program was ended altogether, but, as we will illustrate, it seems that not only was it continued, but its techniques and tactics were seemingly spread out from the individual level of personal manipulation to the collective level of societal manipulation. Thus, let us compare the symptoms of PTSD to the symptoms of neurodiversity. ADHD and autism all have the following symptoms in common: impulsivity, hyperactivity, anxiety, impaired memory, cognitive rigidity, disorientation, dissociation, short attention span speech impairment, reduced sense perception, regressed childlike state, executive dysfunction, low social skills, bipolar tendencies, lack of coordination, etc. Thus, via the 7-base systemic framework of chemical, physical, and emotional assault, the enemy has effectually applied the hypnotic, dissociative techniques of MKUltra to the whole of society. To prove this theory, scholarly sources of evidence provided by many white scholars themselves, along with the empirical evidence of my own symptoms, and with historical evidence of the insidious origins of modern psychiatry and medicine, will be elaborated upon in Episode 2 and further episodes. This episode is only a general introduction to the global phenomena of trauma-based dissociation and silent warfare. The Black community, specifically foundational Black Americans, who are at the lowest of the socioeconomic spectrum of society, is considered to be the childlike, unintelligent population of the world. This is because the enemy has artificially made the collective Black community to function as an incoherent, cognitively distorted neurodivergent. A collective mindset reflects the shared beliefs, values, and emotions of a community, influencing both individual and group behaviors. It embodies the collective consciousness, shaping how community members perceive themselves and their environment, impacting mental health and social dynamics. This mindset can be seen in communal practices, rituals, and responses to challenges which align with the emotional and psychological aspects of the community. When a community experiences trauma or joy, it reverberates through its members, affecting both their psychological states and physical health. Ultimately, the collective mindset serves as a guardian of shared identity, resilience, and communal well-being. Therefore, the collective mindset of a community operates as the mind-body of that community. By utilizing the ultimate tactic of divide and conquer, in which the enemy fragmentizes knowledge of Black minds and bodies, he has disordered the mind of the Black community. The loss of our history means the loss of our memory. Being the most affected by weaponized drugs and chemicals has made us the clowns of the world, in which we are most hyperactive, impulsive, childish, etc. When it comes to economic unity, we have displayed the loss of coordination, avoidance, an extreme lack of will, short attention span, and executive dysfunction. When it comes to defending against our enemy, we have shown not only avoidance and the lack of will, but also extreme passivity, disorientation, and dissociation. Thus, we have exhibited an extreme lack of social interaction with the world and the hallmark symptoms of a collective neurodivergent. All of this is essentially caused by fear, which is essentially caused by ignorance. Ignorance often breeds fear because the unknown can evoke anxiety and uncertainty about potential dangers. When we lack information or understanding about a certain situation, our imagination fills in the gaps with negative scenarios that lead to heightened apprehension. This fear can manifest in various forms, such as social anxieties and broader phobias. This then causes us to react defensively. Furthermore, ignorance perpetuates stereotypes and misconceptions that foster mistrust among groups, which exacerbates societal fears. Education and awareness are crucial in dismantling these fears, as knowledge empowers us to confront uncertainties with informed perspectives. What Black people are most ignorant of today is the knowledge of self, the knowledge of enemy, and the knowledge of God. As stated, this episode is only a generalized introduction to common sense, cognitive distortion, and silent, trauma-based warfare. The following episodes will go into more depth to provide a more detailed analysis of the illusion of neurodiversity, the engineering of dissociation, the ominous origins of modern psychology and medicine, the ultimate agenda of mind control and the elite, as well as concrete sources of evidence. Thus, here is a brief introduction to the monumental book, entitled Common Sense, the Skill Set Manual for Black Self-Development and Defensive Warfare. Introduction. Just as the white Western world has used their own historic scholars as the foundation of their socioeconomic architecture, likewise, all people of melanin, and the foundational Black American in particular, must learn to use their own modern and ancestral scholars, whose theories and philosophies have stood the test of time, and thus proven as adequate foundations for the framework of thought, speech, and action within Black culture. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is the first Black psychologist to have most accurately decoded the system of white supremacy and the dynamics of white psychology thus far. Her theories, backed with scientific, historical, and scriptural evidence, have stood the test of time in being consistent with the physical, observable, and measurable data of today. Her work is based on the concepts of Neely Fuller Jr., the Black intellectual ancestor, who gave us the foundation of language and action codes to use for navigating the system of white supremacy. In his work, entitled The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, Fuller demonstrated how racism and counter-racism is a global system of organized behavior in all areas of people activity. From this, Welsing was able to scientifically prove the psychological basis of all phenomena in this world. In her work, The ISIS Papers, she states, quote, "Heretofore, no Western behavioral scientist has recognized the single connecting thread of logic permeating seemingly unrelated phenomena such as lynchings, smoking objects, bullfights, chocolate candy with nuts, coffee, guns, umbrellas, automobiles, skiing, race, Races and racing. Horse, foot, and car. The Adam and Eve mythology. Moby Dick. Dracula. Frankenstein. The play Equus by Peter Shaffer. Paper money. Gold. Christian religious symbolism. The Nazi swastika. Anti-Semitism. Sexual perversions. Apartheid. Child abuse. Capitalism. Nudism. The Holocaust. Alienation. Sexism. Homosexuality. Pornography. Narcissism. Gambling. Rape. Flags. Men's ties. Etc. All of the above are but a few of the major behavior energy entities, myths and symbols included in the white supremacy system culture that are related to the single underlying law governing the origin and continued existence of Western civilization. End quote. A more detailed analysis of Welsing's theories and the empirical evidence of her concepts will be introduced in Chapter 2, where the scientific foundation for the illusion of neurodiversity will be laid. This concept will be further illuminated by exposing the mechanical architecture of white supremacy in which the full tactical framework of offensive warfare will be decoded. Just as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing built upon the fundamentals of science and the race concepts of Neely Fuller Jr., likewise, the theories, concepts, and principles of common sense can be considered as the continuation of Welsing's full decoding of the system of white supremacy warfare. Fuller and Welsing gave us the objective evidence of how the dynamics of white genetic survival has been projected onto the world. The intricate dynamics of my own life experience provide the empirical evidence of their findings, which will also be backed by concrete mathematics, science, language, history, and scripture as well. Along with this will come a more comprehensive and meticulous dissection of how these same dynamics are fractally applied from the individual to the collective. Thus, let's take Welsing's exact wording for the singularity of all worldly matter, replace a few dynamics, and put it into the context of decoding the mechanistic device of neurodiversity. Heretofore, no Western behavioral scientist had recognized the single connecting thread of logic permeating seemingly unrelated phenomena such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, OCD, business, economics, capitalism, hermeticism, depression, psychosis, hypnotism, PTSD, Melanin, the Neanderthal Caucasoid, Christianity, the Adam and Eve mythology, Nazi mythology, MKUltra, apartheid, alienation, etc. All of the above are but a few of the major behavior energy entities, myths and symbols included in the white supremacy system culture that are related to the single underlying law governing the origin and continued existence of Western civilization. Thus, the archetype which constructed the system of neurodiversity is the same archetype that's used to construct any and all other systems. The mechanisms of neurodiversity have the same base patterns, which are applied on different abstract areas of people activity. The objective of all systems in this world is forever constant: divide, frictionalize, and conquer the biochemical called melanin. The four main systems of the world are the system of laws, the system of humans, the systems of nature and physical reality, and the system of technology. Neurodiversity is a product of the false, inverted application of the rudimentary laws of these systems. From this analysis, we will find that the secret codes and strategic maneuvers of the enemy can be deduced, measured, and predicted. The general objective of any scientist, mathematician, or physicist is to take the isolated abstracts and place them into order. The term abstract refers to something that is not concrete or physical, but rather conceptual, theoretical, or detached from specific instances or material reality. It involves ideas, principles, or qualities that exist in thought or as a mental construct rather than as a tangible object. Abstract concepts are those that cannot be directly perceived by the senses. They are ideas or qualities that exist in the mind rather than in the physical world. Examples include love, justice, freedom, time, and beauty. In mathematics, abstract refers to concepts that are generalized and detached from specific instances. These ideas are built on logical reasoning and axioms, rather than empirical observation. Some examples are numbers, functions, infinity, etc. In philosophy, abstraction is the process of isolating and focusing on the essential qualities of something, while ignoring its specific details or instances, such as the concept of truth, existence, or morality. In science, abstraction involves creating simplified models or theories to represent complex systems or phenomena. These models focus on essential features while removing the unnecessary details. This makes complex ideas easier to understand and work with because the concepts often apply across different contexts, which is why abstraction is a fundamental basis of reason and communication. The 7 base laws of mathematics, which is one of the many systemic archetypes that will be discussed, will further elaborate on the concept of connecting the dots of abstract patterns. In grade school, there are the core classes of mathematics, science, language, and history. Then, there are the extracurricular classes of abstract learning and skill set development. Thus, after going through the 4 essential classes of Black survival, the extra knowledge curriculum will be the detailed warfare manual, which the enemy uses as a framework for executing his silent maneuvers, as well as the defensive warfare manuals for not only Black survival, but Black economic freedom and progression. If the term abstraction means to stick to the fundamentals, to focus on the essential principles or basic elements of a subject, then this means that mastering core concepts and practices, rather than getting distracted by complexities or trends, is one of the primary keys in decoding the matrix simulation of silent warfare. The enemy often utilizes the trick of placing blanketed labels like fundamentalist or fundamentalism on individuals who adhere strictly to core principles, which can oversimplify and misrepresent their beliefs. Fundamentalism is a strict adherence to specific religious beliefs and is characterized by a literal interpretation of sacred texts. It commonly resists modern societal changes, as they are viewed as a threat to traditional values. This ideology often influences political movements and can lead to, in some cases, extremist actions. When someone is labeled as a fundamentalist, it often suggests that they hold extreme or rigid views without acknowledging the nuances of their beliefs. For instance, many who practice a form of fundamentalism may simply be committed to foundational principles without extreme interpretations, and placing the blanketed label ignores the cultural or contextual factors that influence their beliefs. People may hold strong convictions about foundational principles for various reasons, and labeling them as fundamentalists can alienate constructive dialogue. The enemy knows that the term fundamentalism has acquired negative connotations which often imply intolerance or extremism. Thus, he knows that they will be unfairly painted as a radical, which obscures their genuine commitment to core values. There is a difference between one who sticks to fundamentals and one who is a fundamentalist. There are many who may object to the concepts and theories of common sense, but aside from the scholarly and historical sources of evidence, there is still an overall framework which can be utilized for determining ultimate truth and reality. These are the logical lines of demarcation. Demarcations provide a boundary between the realm of reality and the imaginary realm of illusion. It distinguishes truth from falsehood. This is the ultimate defense to the trick of confusion and the illusion of intellectual superiority that is feigned by the white-dominant society. Natural truth boundaries prescribe the circumference of what is possible within this realm of existence and what is not, what is actual and what is not. The survival manuals given to the enemy is what prescribes his circumference of motional activity. His maneuvers can therefore be measured. This logical framework is what will be utilized throughout this podcast. Moreover, determining ultimate truth involves observing the consistent patterns of physical and measurable data over time. Analyzing consistent patterns over time helps establish evidence of truth by revealing the correlations and outcomes that are persistent across various circumstances. These patterns act as indicators which allow us to discern what is factual and dependable through repeated observation and analysis. For instance, scientific methodologies rely on consistent data in order to form conclusions. Empirical evidence is thus the hallmark of science, and scientific truth means nothing without physical observation. In contrast, the enemy has conditioned society to rely on his false, so-called scholarly sources of distorted science and propaganda, which lead us to misguided beliefs and actions, thus creating a distorted perception of reality. The enemy disguises misinformation as truth and manipulates society to understanding reality through his eyes only. It is his science, his mathematics, and his story. When people adhere to misleading narratives, they may find comfort in familiar ideas, but it ultimately hinders critical thinking and informed decision-making. Discerning genuine information from false information demands vigilance and a commitment to uncovering the truth. In the age of information overload, the art of discernment is most crucial. By prioritizing evidence-based observations over fallacies based in psychological tactics and propaganda, we can foster a deeper understanding of the elusive world around us. In conclusion, it must be made crystal clear here that I am not a scholar, psychiatrist, mental health physician, or professional writer. I do not have any academic degrees or professional licenses. Although common sense can point one in the direction of true mental health experts and medical practitioners, common sense itself was not written for the treatment of illness. It is a comprehensive framework which abstracts the patterns of illness and tactical assault and illustrates how the same patterns are applied to different areas. It is a defensive warfare guide which was crafted based on the empirical, mathematical, scientific, and historical evidence of my own personal experiences as a neurodivergent, trauma-affected individual.